Hi, this is going to be an overview of the SCOBot runtimes. These offer both SCORM 1.2 and 2004 compatibility for your platform. If you are in a situation, and I do encounter a lot of different skill sets where you might not be privy to front-end technologies and you just need something to display content and you want to plug that into your backend, this does give you the capability to do something like that. I just typically need a little bit of time to kind of understand your needs. So I kind of like to custom orient what kind of training you commonly would get, because it'll be from that all the way through to I want to replace an LMS, to I want to replace or build a mobile app or something along those lines. So trying to do one video to encompass all of those things is almost impossible. But what I don't want to have happen is you just encounter a wall of text, your eyes gloss over, and you check out, because quite honestly, that's fairly easy to do. And so I'm going to offer up this video as kind of a option. So if you do come in here and you still feel like this is too much, we can kind of tune this up a little bit. And I'll give you some video guidance here, and this will hopefully kind of field some questions later in a more tuned way versus just generic stuff that we all run into. So broad strokes is we commonly have an authoring system that generates content or has already done that, and we have cases where millions and millions of dollars of content was produced. Nobody wants to go back and fix certain things, so what do we do about it? And the SCOBot Runtime APIs kind of give you some capability to roll with some punches, but obviously we can't invent data. So if you're not getting score, we can debug and take a look at that. But if it's not reporting it, most likely you're just not going to have it. Although there are some rare cases where there's just a script error or something. So content frustrations aside, that does happen. And then you have the exported package, which is commonly a zip file. And what we've done is built out a parser for that. That way you don't have to think about this too much. There's a couple ways to do it. You typically unzip this and then you can read the XML file. I generally turn this in to data that I can place into the backend, meaning a database, a NoSQL database, file even. I've had some cases where this has been deployed on a USB stick, and those are just handed around Africa. And if that's the case, then yeah, you've got a lot of different options, and it's just a matter of collecting this data so you can then report on it. And then as far as the import process goes, obviously unzipping, reading this manifest file that comes with this package is the biggest thing. And then you're going to have a launch file. And by reading this XML file, it's going to tell you the title. It's going to tell you what launch file to fire up. It could potentially contain other information about thresholds and timeouts and convey a lot of rich information, again, that we need to merge back with the student data object that we're going to kind of collect and allow the content to talk to. So we're both reading and writing values from that. So I would think about it like a database. And I gave you an example here of something like that in JavaScript object notation. It's just a hierarchical language that allows you to kind of cleanly define key value pairs. So key being like a name and the value being your first name if you'd like. So and or last name. So you have different options here. And then the instantiation of the runtimes, again, the Cybercushion kind of object model here of COM, Cybercushion plugins, and then whichever runtime we need to fire up, it's going to be based on the package that you have. You can turn debugging on or off. You can pass in different timeout values because we may have content that just never initializes. And what I don't like is leaving the student kind of guessing, and that's a horrible experience. So I'll commonly throw a no initialize type error, which is your cue to say, okay, there's probably a problem with this piece of content, or it's just very slow. There are shockingly a lot of pieces of content out there that are like really large. So just again, you can tune that and just understand that that's available. All right, so listeners. There is a utility file that I include with this that allows you to plug into these events. It's going to fire again initialize, potentially no initialize, and then you'll get back a commit, which is your cue to save. And then it'll, if it does ever say terminated, then that means it's done. And you can actually exit this content, return back to your course catalog or assignments pane, and allow the student to continue. So there's a lot of different options there. I'm giving you the broad strokes. There's obviously much more rich, complex things like sequence and navigation that I generally try to stay away from. But if this is something you're getting into, I've actually written a lot of that out and can get you running on that. I just want to make sure that's clear. That starts to get more complicated and has a lot of ramifications on your user interface. So yeah, let's just leave it there, but just know a little more complex. And like I said, these event listeners will plug into things that you do. So like for me, I might have been using GraphQL, or you could be using REST or some type of action-based backend service. And this is where you're just going to basically pass the data that comes out of the runtime APIs to your backend APIs, and then do what you like with them. If you want to parse that information for trophies or some type of achievement type graphics that you want to convey, or just simple bar progress type work or something along those lines, you can harvest those data points and take action with those as well. And then of course obviously saving it to the back end. Now I myself, I just keep this entire thing intact, and I actually roll up keep data points that I like progress, satisfied, or completion. And then the score. But if you need more than that, you can actually dig into that. So like I said, there's the parser. This is written in Node.js. You're going to get an example of that. You could actually, and I've started to do this, convert it to TypeScript. I'm trying to deal with lots of different requests. I know there's still a lot of people out there using jQuery too, so I'm trying to stay a little bit flexible to the different options on that front. And then the lesson viewer, or the player that it's sometimes coined as at the LMS level. This can commonly be an iframe. You could launch a new window. You're going to probably have a different front end, maybe framework that you're using. If you're not using anything, then I at least provide an example of that, again in jQuery and in Angular 9 using Twitter Bootstrap. There's other frameworks out there, of course. You've got Foundation, Skeleton, and I'm probably starting to show my age here because, yeah, they grow like weeds. And if there's one you really like, you can absolutely pivot to that. It doesn't have any direct connection to SCORM itself. The cross-domain, this is that situation where your content's not going to be residing with your platform domain, and it's separate. Now, SCORM's going to end up generally causing a problem here because it's looking for same origin, and I know that's geek speak for some weird error that you don't understand, but the browsers themselves don't like to allow scripts to communicate outside its own domain, so you're going to end up with a cross, I think they call it a cross scripting security bit that comes in and stops that from happening. Makes everybody's day worse. And what we did is actually created a wrapper to put the frame that it would launch in with the content, and then you're going to end up talking to that. It's pretty boilerplate, but it's an option if you want to use that out of the box or kind of hand roll your own, because I leave examples for both. And then last but not least, SCORM doesn't talk about quite a bit, if I'm being honest. So even the whole SCORM 1.2 standard was generally optional. SCORM 2004 tightened it up a little bit, but it's always been JavaScript to JavaScript. I've worked several different places where I was seeing people doing strange and interesting things with it that was well outside of what the purview of SCORM was. And when you do that type of stuff, you're commonly making yourself less portable. And what you want to do is try to put the S, which is the shareable bit, in the content object. So everything is referred to as a SCO. That's why you see me do wordplay with SCOBot. And I'm just generally trying to make this a little bit easier for everybody because I'm wrapping all these methods and functions that you would have had to write from scratch. And then the APIs themselves are enforcing the specification where it makes sense. There was a lot of truncation, limits and other things in there that I just generally ignored because it's up to you. If you want to truncate data, that's your call. I don't, but It's just an option. So again, remember, this goes back over 20 years now, and it was patched up to about 2009. But I have this demo here, and this is what I want to talk about. So if you fire this up, you can self-log in. Simply just go ahead and enter your information. It'll send you an email with a code. Put that code in, and you should be logged in. At that point, you'll either be able to download a sample piece of content that I offer. I do sometimes see online people are looking for content just to test with. I'm thinking about adding a little bit more to that because I had some QUnit tests, and that would compress like a 25-minute session to test your platform in just milliseconds. And that would make you feel a little bit better about how you got that set up. I've had some customers have issues with resuming content. I want to make sure we understand that commonly what happens is you'll engage in a piece of content like this. I'm going to go ahead and just pause this video. We don't want to listen to REO Speedwagon. This is actually fake content, but I was showing learner preferences working with a video, and I wanted you to have a quick button here where you could hit pass. Now, if the content doesn't actually do what is considered done or finished, which would be setting the exit type to either empty or normal, this will be generally defaulted potentially in suspend. And I'm going to show that right now. So I'm going to hit exit. And what you're going to see right now is that this is completed. It's 100%, but it's still in progress because it didn't get that message. And then if we resume it, and I'm going to go ahead and press done, now I'm actually done. And what you're going to see here is a try again or a review. So that's kind of the way they designed this, because you have different entry points. You could have even just been browsing this content. You could be technically not given credit. There's just a lot of stuff kind of hidden in the background that the student doesn't necessarily see that, in my opinion, led to some, kind of poor user experiences at time. But again, there was a lot of folks contributing to this, and I tried to give you a visual display for anybody who's doing content authoring of what this looks like. Okay, so outside of just making edits here, you can actually come in, change your volume, your video speed, different language, or closed captioning. Just understand that the content might not respond to any of this. But that's just for your knowledge. There wasn't a whole lot of rules about that. Generally, it should have. Does it? Probably not. But it really just depends on the course content and who made it. The cross-domain testing is here, so if you want to test that, you can turn that off or on. And then I had this concept of returning to assignments after it does exit, and then you can always reset your attempt. You can also download your attempt object if you want to see what that looks like. I just did that so you could kind of see the key value pairs get populated, and again, it's in JSON. So as long as you just have any text editor, Notepad, Ultra Edit, VS Code, for example, if you have a little bit of a text editor, a code editor, that should work. You can even open it in the browser. And then I give you an old static, kind of display of a traditional table of contents that the packages may have more than one content object, so you could have those displayed. Now, the last thing I'll cover is I often get asked, what is it like to implement? This is an Angular page, and I'm going to go ahead and scroll up to the top here, but the JavaScript files are set up so you can just import them. In this case, this is an Angular app, but if you're using React or Vue or even jQuery, there's a jQuery equivalent to this, and you would just be including that and then instantiating these where it makes sense. And then the student data object is supplied as an example, but here you can see all of those key value pairs. And I've commented out or ghosted some text here so you can use that for a reference. That's data that you might see, again, not guaranteed. There are little quirky things here. Ab initio means the beginning in Latin, and then entry would be resume when they're trying it the second time. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. I hope that answered a few questions, kind of got a little bit of a gist of how this works, and I will talk to everybody later.